Tonight we have a very exciting event planned with 4 renowned experts. We will discuss how real estate, corporate site selection, and education interact to drive competitiveness in the 21st century. We have Mr. Chris Camacho with GPEC, Mr. Jay Cross with Webster Global Site Selectors, Dr. Jeff Goldberg with the University of Arizona, and Mr. John Kilrow with Shea Properties. We will begin this evening by hearing from Mayor Christian Price, followed by the City Economic Development Director, Micah Miranda. Our 4 panelists will share insight into their industry, their role, and what they do to maintain a competitive edge. Mr. Miranda will moderate the discussion and open it up for questions. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Honorable Mayor Christian Price. Mayor Christian Price is in his first term as Mayor of Maricopa. A regional businessman, Mayor Price is one of the community's strongest advocates. His participation in regional and national coalitions is helping Maricopa extend our reach and increase our awareness. He is the chairman of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council's Ambassadors Group, a member of the Maricopa Association of Governments Economic Development Committee, as well as a member of the Community and Economic Development Committee for the National League of Cities, just to name a few. It is obvious and it is fair to say that his passion lies in economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mayor Christian Price.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate that. My wife hates that I have to go to all those meetings, but I certainly enjoy it because I think it moves Maricopa forward farther, faster. I'm going to give you kind of a synopsis tonight, just briefly. Some of you have seen this before. It comes from some of my State of the City address, but we also have a room full of people that have also not heard this before, and I really want people to understand what Maricopa is trying to accomplish, what we're trying to do here, and you know, we're 10 years old this year. People don't realize that we're 10 years old as a city this year, and as such, we've come a long way, but we truly are a bedroom community, and if we want to be more than that, we've got to focus on the next 10 years, and we have to start laying foundations for how and what we're going to do to accomplish more. Now, as you know, the City of Maricopa has 5 priorities: economic sustainability, quality of life, transportation, public safety, and quality municipal services. And everything that the City Council tries to accomplish falls within these 5. Now, it is true that I can go all day on our challenges in each of these, and we will talk about some of them here tonight, but it needs to be understood that this is where we start. This is our foundation, and this is our strategic plan. So I just kind of wanted to briefly give you this history of Maricopa. 2003, the city incorporates. 2005, we come up with an economic development team. So right from the beginning, we understand the need for this. 2006, you have Pecana Park come online. The police department, 2007. That's a huge deal. People don't often give that much credit. But to have police and fire come along is a really big issue, especially for such a small city at such an early age. 2009, you have Maricopa Public Library, the Walmart. You have in 2010 the Estrella Gen property, which is going to become part of our business park, and so we'll talk more about that. The Heritage District, Cowtown relocation, the DCR for the 347 grade separation. That is a really, really big deal, the grade separation, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. 2012, Shop Local initiative comes in, the facade improvement program, and Banner Health came to Maricopa. In 2013, you have Central Arizona College that located here, Dignity Health, and of course a new City Hall. And excuse me, soon to be this year in 2014, you'll see the opening of Copper Sky here in just over a couple of weeks, with 18 acres of retail development in front of that. So you're going to start see the push towards this area in a way never before seen. So if you look at our moniker, it says proud history, prosperous future. And we have to see that when we're trying to talk about being competitive, what does that mean? What does a prosperous future mean for us if we want to be competitive against all these other cities? And I often talk about the box. We have a lot of challenges here. This box is in which we live in. We go left and they say you can't go over here, and we go right and they say, oh, you can't do it this way. Well, I understand the box, but if I really want to get outside the problem, I've got to get outside the box. I've got to start thinking outside of it. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So the first challenge that we need to overcome is our 347 overpass. I talked about the pinch point. That pinch point, if you look at our general planning area for the city, you look along the 347. I always equate it to the Vegas Strip. Everybody wants to be on the Vegas Strip. That's where all the traffic is. But the city of Maricopa's got to think bigger. We have to get off this strip. And in order to alleviate this pinch point, we have to solve this issue, because at some point in the near future, 2/3 of the entire city will be south of the tracks, not north of the tracks like it is now. And in order to do that, we've got to span 4 lanes of potential traffic that UPRR has the right-of-way for. Imagine 250, 300 trains a day coming through the city, stopping everything at a halt, as well as having an Amtrak station that is Phoenix's only Metro Amtrak station, and in so doing, it sits for 30 minutes because the platform isn't large enough. Okay, this is a real issue, so we've got to solve this problem, and we're very, very, very close to doing it. The next issue in transportation is we kind of have a one-way in, one-way out here in the city of Maricopa. This one-way in, one-way out is the 347. We have to have additional alternatives. If we want bigger businesses to come here, they have to feel like they can have an operation in which they're not grounded if something happens on the 347. Any of you who have lived here or have been here a while know that when there's an accident, it closes down. And sometimes the only way around is to go all the way around. And that's to go back, go down around through Casa Grande, or go to the I-8 and come back around. We need an east-west corridor, and that's what we're working on here. And so without going into too many details, the east-west corridor will link I-10 with basically southern Maricopa, and as we know it now, and provide another way, another route that is more freeway-esque or highway towards the I-10. Again, providing kind of a loop system. So that's something that's been in the works for a while, and something we're getting closer and closer to with the help of Pinal County. Any of you who have lived here for a while, flooding is a big issue. I don't have it in this slide presentation today, but I usually like to show the flooding issues that happen here. People say, why would you want to do that? Well, it's interesting because in the city of Maricopa, it's dry 365 days a year, but every now and then it decides to rain. And when it does, it can get ugly. And then you have things called levees, and when levees break, you have flooding. And in the past 25 years, we've had 2 500-year floods and 1 100-year flood. And I always joke, I'm not sure how you get 1,200 years worth of floods in 25 years, but we seem to do it. So we have to fix this problem, but it's bigger than us. We can't just do it on our own. We have to deal with the federal government. We have to deal with the bureaucracy that is much larger than we are. And so in order to progress, we have to solve this problem, because it's the law that you can't take taxpayer dollars and build in a floodplain. Okay? That becomes a real problem. Well, if your city happens to lie in a floodplain as designated by FEMA, that becomes an issue. So we can do this on an individual basis. You see this occurring right now across from the QT. Any of you that are familiar with the area, you see all that construction happening. They're dealing with an individual floodplain solution. But it puts us at a competitive disadvantage when a company comes and says, I want to build here. Well, wonderful. Start tomorrow. The issue is now they got to throw $2 million into a floodplain solution first. Well, their bottom line just got moved up. And that becomes a real issue. So I don't say this to air our dirty laundry, but what I do say it is from a foundational standpoint, from a vision standpoint, we have to recognize the problems so that we can focus on fixing them and do so in a variety of creative ways. It's not always just the city. It's not always just the county or the state. It's not always the federal government. There are things called public-private partnerships, which we'll discuss here in the future. And so those are some areas we need to look at as well. So when I look at Maricopa, the reason I get so excited about it is that it's a blank slate. Any of you that drove here today saw that this place sits pretty much in the middle of a farmland. And I know what you're thinking. Why on earth did you put a city hall in the middle of a farmland? That's crazy. But, you know, and I always admit, I was one of the people that thought that. But what I've learned is that it was a dang good idea. And the reason is because I can't wait to see this place in 10 years. And I look out now and I see that farmland, but we own 140 acres around this. And it clearly says on the moniker, City Center. The vision is how do we make this with mixed retail, with industrial, with a place where it becomes alive at night. And so you truly just don't have a place where our government employees come to work and then it shuts down. But rather it becomes an area that people want to come to and visit all times of the day, all times at night, and it will be a very different place 10 years from now. So Maricopa has an amazing talent pool, and people don't often give it credit. So we look at Maricopa Unified School District, Central Arizona College. This is a huge, huge statistic. 46% of the people that live in this city have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's incredible. That's incredible when you take a per capita of any other city out there. When businesses want to relocate, they want to make sure that they have the talent pool to pull from. That's incredible. And I think that that speaks a lot for us. I also want to just mention as a good or a bad, recently the government, the city here had a hiring fair. You probably all heard it, for the Copper Sky project. And in that, we had 75 jobs. Some of those were part-time, some of those were full-time. We had 725 people show up for that. Were they looking for jobs because they were out of work? Maybe some were. But most of them said they would rather take a pay cut to stay and work in Maricopa than they would rather travel out of town. That's a huge statistic, okay? 65% age 21 and up, 70,000 mean household income. Again, very, very educated community. Our industry. I believe that we can't sit around and wait for it to happen. Sometimes you have to get in the garden, you have to grow your own. And that's what we're trying to do with the MCE, the Center for Maricopa, the Maricopa Center for Entrepreneurship. Sometimes the next Dell is in the garage next door. You don't know that until you help them out. And so the idea is, if we can put them on a path to understanding what an incubator is and how to take that and grow it and take that seed and nurture it and plant it and move it forward, it turns into a ripe plant that becomes a huge moneymaker for those that are willing to employ, as well as the city and all of its residents. And so that's one of the areas that we're focusing on. We also envision a 238 tech corridor. I understand that at some point Chandler will eventually fill up. They will reach their maximum of people in which they just don't have places to build anymore. And then they have to go vertical. And when they go vertical and they go up, it becomes exponentially more expensive. So why isn't Maricopa the next logical choice? In my vision, it is. And I think that what we stand to gain is we need to start laying the foundation now along our major corridors, along 347 and 238, so that we have the foundation ready to go. So as these leads come in, as these businesses come to visit, we can show and point to them, this is what we have ready now. We're ready to go. You just have to come in. And that's what we want to accomplish with the 238 corridor. Phoenix Mart. This is an amazing potential and opportunity for us. Even though it's in Casa Grande, I don't fault them for that. What I do see is that this is an amazing experience that is going to bring global businesses and global travelers from all over the world to this area. You notice it's called Phoenix Mart because nobody knows where Casa Grande is, right? Nobody knows where Mesa is, for that matter, when you're talking about somebody who lives in China. I don't know all those small towns in France, for example, but I know where Paris is. So you call it Phoenix Mart. It's one of 3 in the world, and at the end of the day, you're going to see an increase of people that need to have business space, living space, and all the surrounding industries that go with this. Think of all the people that want to do laundry or dry cleaning or clean or have hotels or hotel spaces. They all flow off of the seed. And this is going to be an area-changing experience for both Casa Grande and especially for Maricopa. Deal closing funds. I've talked about this before. It's something that I'm passionate about. It doesn't make or break a deal, but it keeps you at the table. Okay? We all know that if you don't have a seat at the table, you don't get the opportunity to close the deal. And that's when you don't want to be swept in the trash. It was interesting, last night I had the opportunity to sit down with some people, and one of the things they first said to me is, oh, you're a small city, you probably don't have much in the way of incentives. And I said, well, it is true, we don't have all the incentives I would like, but we have lots of other ways that we can be creative. And I kind of left it at that. But I would love to be able to say, well, yeah, it's true, but we also do have a deal closing fund. If we can make this happen as a city council, if we can find it in the budget, we'll be the first city in Pinal County to do so. And I encourage Pinal County as well to move down this way so that we can join from a state level, the ACA, the Arizona Commerce Authority, who has a deal closing fund. Maricopa County has a deal closing fund. But if Pinal County and City of Maricopa can also have one, it helps put us on the map and it makes us more competitive towards these other cities that we every day compete against. Public-private partnerships. Ak-Chin is a huge example. Maricopa Unified School District. I don't mean to fly through these. I've probably taken too long already, but Ak-Chin, they do some amazing things for us. And they are partners that are helping us bring us forward on this overpass. If it wasn't for their help, it just wouldn't happen. They are doing wonderful things for the area. They are wonderful regional partners, and I hope people understand that. To the same extent as Maricopa Unified School District, I love what we're doing with them. We all have lots of needs, but we can find creative ways in which we can bind together, take the assets we do have, and become ultimately successful. Gila River is another great companion when we talk about our 347 overpass. They have also given money towards the design and architecture of it. Central Arizona College, same thing. With their facility here, it helps bring to the area the idea that education is important. It is more than an idea, it's a reality. And I'm sure you'll hear this again from our site selectors tonight and others that talk about that. Education is one of the primary reasons a business relocates to an area. Whether it's higher education because of talent, or whether it's school education for the CFO or CEO's children that are going to go to school. They have to be feeling like they're going to a top-notch area. And if they don't, they won't come here. So those are the things we have to work on. And of course, our development community. Public-private partnerships with our development community. Together, we can find ways to build things. We can find ways to deal with permitting issues and make things more palatable for everybody. We just have to be able to say, this is the way it's always been done. We're not going to accept that, and we're going to try a different way. Okay? These are just some of the people that we work with on a daily basis. You have CAG, you have MEDA, Pinal Partnership, Arizona League of Cities and Towns, the Maricopa Association of Governments, FHWA, you name it. We work with them because at the end of the day, our motto is no stone unturned. We are not going to stop for anything. And finally, that brings us to the MAP program. The MAP program is, I've had the opportunity this year and the distinct honor to be appointed as the chairman of the Greater Phoenix Economic Council. And in so doing, you have a large population, even 1,000, 1,200 people that subscribe to this, and this is businesses, CEOs, other municipalities, economic development teams, and they get to see the city of Maricopa represented in front of them every single time we host something. Every single time an email goes out, the city of Maricopa is represented. It is a wonderful honor, but more importantly, it gives us an opportunity to showcase who we are. Just like I told you last night, I was able to be invited to a small intimate gathering where we got to sit down directly with a company that is looking to locate. Now, they may or may not locate here. That's not the point. The point is we had a seat at the table, we were the only municipality there, and afterwards, guess who they were talking about? They were talking about this city. That puts us on the map. Those are the things that we want to constantly be a part of. But we need to take it a step further. And this is where you all come in. We want to have these types of events on a regular basis so that you can learn firsthand what goes into economic development. It is not as easy as saying, space, company, you're there, good job. That would be great. That would be so easy. I mean, these guys wouldn't even need to be here tonight if that was the case, okay? But it doesn't work like that. There are so many ways to say no and only one way to say yes, and you have to bring them all together at the same time. And so what I hope that you will learn from tonight is the challenges that go into economic development, but more importantly, it is about networking. It is about connections. It is about vision. It is about foundation laying. And if you put all those together, what you get is success. And so tonight, the introduction again of the MAP program stands for the Maricopa Advocates Program. The Maricopa Advocates Program is the ability for each of you to come to be a participant in our economic development. You all have your own regions of success. You have your own jobs, you have your own lives, and you have your own social networks. And you all touch and reach people that I do not. For as much and as hard as I might try, you just have friends that I don't. But what I want you to have is I want you to have a direct line of communication to our economic development team. I want you to be able to come forward and say, I have a friend who owns this type of industry, and I'd like to put you two together. Okay? That's just the start. It's a grassroots effort. I get that. But the other side of it is if you're going to change the mentality of the way this city views itself, we have to start with you. We have to start with your garage conversations. And when people are bad-mouthing the city or they think that they have an idea of what it is, we want to change that. And the only way to do it is to be informed. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. We're going to have a great discussion. I know Mike is going to lead a little bit more on this, and then we're going to turn the time over, and we're going to go from there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Price. Next, I would like to introduce Micah Miranda, Director of Economic Development and tonight's moderator. Micah has over 12 years of experience as an economic practitioner. He provides the city an outstanding background in business attraction, business retention, small business assistance, and comparative tax analysis. Micah is a certified economic developer through the International Economic Development Council and represents the city on several regional committees. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Micah Miranda.
Good evening and welcome. Before I get started, I really want to thank my staff, Denise, Michael, Ruben, for helping to put this event on. It really is a monumental task, and they do a great job, and we do appreciate it. So I want to lead off tonight by talking about the city's vision for economic development. This vision is spelled out in the city's economic development strategic plan, which was adopted almost 3 years ago now. It was in June of 2011. And what it says is Maricopa will be a leading regional partner, providing growth opportunities for businesses by delivering high-quality services, sites, and talent to local, regional, national, and international businesses. What this says is we want to be competitive. We want to have all the infrastructure and amenities in place to attract business, and this is what we work for. It's interesting. I often get asked, what does economic development do? And one of those people happens to be my wife, who was kind enough to come down here and learn. So thanks. The first thing we're an analyst. As practitioners, we need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of our community better than anybody else. We have to be able to articulate what that local advantage is. We also have to be the catalyst. Practitioners leverage the involvement of different public and private sector individuals to make something happen. That's why the Maricopa Advocate Program is so important. That's why our involvement in these regional committees is, one of the best things we can do to advocate for Maricopa. And we're here to invoke enthusiasm. We have a great mayor, great city council who can convey that vision and do it with enthusiasm that gets me excited to get up here and follow you. So thank you, Mayor Price. We're also a gap filler. Economic developers provide assistance, and this kind of falls into the deal closing category. But we should not supplant the private sector. If it's not a good idea, we shouldn't get involved. We're there to fill the delta when good things should happen, but otherwise couldn't. We're also the advocate. We speak out for the well-being of the community and protects the interests of the business. We are private sector's advocate inside the city. We work as ombudsman. If you encounter obstacles or challenges, I want you to reach out to myself or anyone on my staff to solve those issues. We have great partners around the city who helps us in this. Maricopa Chamber of Commerce, MITA, they're there to help advocate on behalf of the business community. And we're also educators. Part of our job is to teach a public that just doesn't know about economic development. And again, this is the role MAP can play for us. So talking about competitiveness, some of you may have seen this slide before, and what this shows is currently an unbalanced economic situation. It's not unique to a city of 10 years, but what it shows is we have one job for every 3 rooftops. That's not a sustainable local economic development strategy. We want to equal that out. We will over time. We understand we're new, but we want to get there quicker. So what does the balanced situation look like? It looks like 1.3 houses per every job. So we have a ways to go. We understand that. To put that in perspective, if we were to get to the regional average by adding 500 houses a year and 500 jobs, it would take 55 years. 55 years. Well, that makes sense, but we want to get there faster. So what are we working towards on a daily basis to make that happen? Well, these are the 5 areas we focus on daily. One is marketing. Being a new city, a lot of times people have never been to Maricopa. Their perceptions may be way off as to the reality of Maricopa. We have tremendous assets that people don't know about. Copper Sky is coming online. And we share this messaging via external marketing. We spend a lot of time working with our regional economic development partners, trade shows, sales missions. However, we want to convey this to our local residents. So we have an internal message, and that's part of the Advocate program. Tools, the mayor touched on the deal closing fund. Having that as a resource, whether it's $25,000, $100,000, it's almost irrelevant. What we're looking to do is grow tools, and something like a deal closing fund could help with that. We also have online tools, Maricopa Prospector. For the property owners out there, that's a tool the city manages for you to go online, upload your property to market it. We're happy to upload that information for you. We want the general public to understand what tools are available. Sites. I'm sure some of our site selectors and regional partners will talk about the importance of having shovel-ready sites, so I won't go into too much detail there, but at the city level right now, we are moving forward with the development of the Estrella Gym Business Park, and that is a big deal for the city of Maricopa. We don't have a business park. We have approximately 10 to 15,000 square feet of office, of which we have less than 10% vacancy and no office suite greater than 2,200 square feet. So the leads we do generate, we don't even have a place to put them at this point. So that's a huge opportunity we're working towards. The incubator, the mayor touched on that as well. It stands for Maricopa Center for Entrepreneurship. It is 1 year old this year. We went from a virtual incubator to now having a physical space located off John Wayne Parkway. That's critical for Maricopa. When you take a step back and you look at our economy, it's based on small businesses. There's no other way around it at this point. 60% of those businesses are home-based, and the average business has 3.6 employees. So what we're trying to do here as part of our economic development strategy is not only work to recruit, but to grow internally. 80% of all job growth comes through small businesses. We want to provide the resources for them to prosper. MC will provide those resources. They recently announced a microloan program to businesses who are pre-capital stage, looking to get access to buy equipment, leases, and so forth. And then talent. This is huge. We keep hearing a stat, and it's something I like to talk about, is that within 15 years, 40% of all the engineers in the country will be retiring. That's a significant stat. And so as we look and talk with our partners in technology, a lot of their concerns lay on talent. Well, what opportunity exists for Maricopa there? One of those opportunities is, why can't Maricopa be home to one of the leading engineering schools in the nation? And that's one of the ideas Mayor Price has laid out, and we're going to be working towards over the next decade. So these are big, long-term, ambitious goals that we're working towards. Well, how do we do this? We do this with our partners. And staying in the vein of tonight's theme of competitiveness, and you see the chess pieces in the background. Well, the University of Arizona, Greater Phoenix Economic Council, Shea Properties, and Webster Global Site Selectors are all chess pieces on this chessboard that we're trying to align strategically to win the game. And the game is to be competitive and drive Maricopa's competitiveness in the 21st century. So now I'll turn it back over to Denise, and she'll introduce the panel.
Thank you, Micah. At this time, I'll introduce a panel. We searched high and low for them to ensure the evening would be interesting, educational, and entertaining. So no pressure, gentlemen. Representing the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, an organization that is tasked with promoting the Greater Phoenix economic development to create jobs and shape the region's future, is Chris Camacho. He oversees GPEC's business development efforts with particular expertise in renewable energy, emerging technology, tax policy, and international economic development. He manages domestic and international strategies in attracting new industry to the Arizona market. Chris, please come up.
Very good. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank the mayor and council and Micah and the staff for having me this evening and for the introduction. I've been at Greater Phoenix Economic Council for 6 years, and I've been in 10 years in economic development and leadership, focusing on attracting high-wage jobs and building new industries in this market. And I want to tell you a little bit about GPEC, and you know what this embodies to me is really the evolution of really the philosophy of communities growing up. And when I look at a town like Maricopa, and working with the last mayor that was here, now working with the new mayor, just the enthusiasm that exists is really what embodies the Metro Phoenix communities. And so GPEC is 23 communities that have been assembled to come together and really promote the attributes of the region, but really drive the regional strategy on the economy. And really what that means for the layman's terms is we have 23 mayors actually heading one direction for the betterment of the region. Because in reality, as economic developers, I mean, I can say 10 years ago this is very different, but companies ultimately look at regions and markets. They don't look at cities. And so you have to unify the efforts of respective cities to pool those assets and resources to compete against Dallas, against Austin, all these other markets. And so that's what GPEC does. And you would read about us in the papers working with, say, Google or Apple or some of these big projects. But the reality is we work with our communities also on building the right economic fabrics and foundations that really promote entrepreneurship, innovation, that support small business connectivity. Because at the end of the day, as Mike alluded to, a majority of your jobs created are going to come from your local industry base. But in reality also, a lot of these big, what I would call catalyst projects like Intel, support 1,700 businesses in this state. And so these are all your small businesses, and many of your residents are commuting to these large installations and employers throughout the Southeast Valley. And one final point, because I know we're short on time, we've got a lot of people who love to talk, including myself, is when Mayor talked about the Price Road Corridor in Chandler, and I see these peripheral communities, and I really grasp the forward vision that looks 20 years ahead. What's Maricopa going to be at that time? And when I hear that the relationship between jobs and households, that's a very unsustainable situation that the community's in. And the way our tax code is written, I'm a tax nerd and tax guy. When you look at what drives an economy today, it's largely driven by sales taxes, which is driven by disposable income, which is driven by job creation. Okay, and high wage jobs. And so this is all tied together, this economic picture, which we'll talk more about. But I'm excited to see that the mayor and council and others are really embodying economic development. I'll talk about the deal closing fund, infrastructure, my thoughts on employment centers, how important those are to companies nowadays. Because one thing I will share, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues, is that companies no longer will wait for communities to put in infrastructure to build out what they need. It has to be ready for them. And so, site selection, as the team will tell you, is no longer site selection, it's really site elimination. So they're going through vast amounts of data, vast amounts of sites, vast amounts of regions, vast amounts of employment centers to find out which ones can they eliminate and which ones can they elevate the companies. And so we'll talk further about that as we go through the additional questions tonight.
Thank you, Chris. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jay Cross. He spent more than 20 years running global operations for a Fortune 500 aerospace company. During his tenure, he directed multiple greenfield site selections and saw them through to construction completion in the US, India, and Singapore. Mr. Cross is currently a site selection consultant with Webster Global Site Selectors. Please help me welcome him.
Thank you, Denise. And I'd also like to thank Mayor Price and council, city officials, and the citizens of Maricopa for supporting this. Sounds like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, so hopefully this will be beneficial to you. Thank you, Micah and Denise, for organizing this. And anybody that's looking for that guy, he left town in 2010 when he retired as the bank president. One of the key things that we have to do as site selectors is communicate with the communities, communicate with our end users. It's one of the things that we do is we try to connect those people. That's really our job. I won't go on about exactly what we do, but we're a relatively young company. We're proud of the jobs and the capital expenditures that we've been able to bring the communities that we work with. Just to touch base a little bit on things that are key, and Micah talked about a little bit, attending the regional conferences. People do business with people. I don't care what business you're in, that's the way it works, and relationships are key, and you've got to get out there and you have to work those markets. And they need to know where Maricopa is. This is just a little bit of a sort of upside down pyramid of the way decisions happen. And everybody that does any site selection work or analysis knows it starts with costs. And you start to eliminate sites based on costs and what's ready and what's not ready. We'll talk a little bit more in the panel discussion about what I call the tangible intangibles. And it's where sometimes the decisions get made. And it's on that quality of life, incentive, community support, the kinds of things that feel good about one site versus the other that may be very close when you run the spreadsheets. We heard about this a little bit, shovel-ready sites, certified sites. Those are, you just have to have those in today's world. And I think one of the things that's important for Maricopa is you do have land, you do have a vision, and keeping that blocking and tackling and keeping those jobs rolling in and keeping those small successes and building the momentum, not losing sight of that. I think you've got an excellent plan in place. Quality of life, something, again, that we've touched on. Cost of living is important to everybody. And no matter, I could double my salary and move to New York and live in a little apartment. That's not fun. So it's real to everybody, and it does sell. And recreational activities, quality of life, work-life balance, all of those things play in, cultural activities, education we'll hear about. Those are all part of that sort of tangible, intangible quality. I'm going to leave off with that. We are Webster Global Site Selectors. Hopefully we can add something to this. And again, I congratulate the city on promoting this and taking the time to learn more about it.
Thank you, Mr. J. Cross. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jeff Goldberg. He's the Dean of the College of Engineering at the University of Arizona. He holds a PhD from the University of Michigan in Industrial and Operations Engineering, and a Master's of Engineering and a Bachelor of Science from Cornell University in Operations Research and Industrial Engineering. Dr. Jeff Goldberg has been with the University of Arizona since 1985 in the Systems and Industrial Engineering Department. He also has 4 lovely children and 1 daughter that's getting married in June. Please help me welcome Dr. Goldberg.
Thank you. Let me have the thank you very much. The quality of life button. That was the back button. Let's go to the forward button, Jeff. Everyone calls me Jeff. There's no ego in my house. My wife ensures that. And I'm the kind of a doctor that can't help anybody. And that's how I'm well known. So I'm a PhD. I basically grew up as a middle-class kid in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad worked in the post office. My mother worked for city government. Not a lot of kids in my neighborhood went to Cornell. So I've been given an incredible opportunity, and hopefully I've taken a little bit advantage of it. They asked me to talk a little bit about the University of Arizona and the College of Engineering. I start every presentation with the same slide, our 5 core values, and I like the way you started exactly the same way. If you're going to work with somebody, they got to know something about you. They know about your values. That's the most important thing. And so for us, if you're going to work with us, we're going to expect you to be excellent. We're going to expect ourselves to be excellent as well. We're going to make mistakes, but we're going to fix them. We're going to work hard to do that. We're going to communicate open and honestly with you. That may mean telling you something you don't want to hear. That's too bad, but that's the way we're going to be. We're going to be very direct. And you'll see that on the panel here as well. 3, we're going to deal ethically with you. We're not going to try to trick you. We're not going to try to take advantage of you. We're not going to give you a deal that we wouldn't take ourselves. And so that's how we work with people. 4, diversity. We appreciate diversity. If you want to solve hard engineering problems, it's not just a bunch of white middle-aged guys like me sitting at the table solving the problems. I'll talk about that in our program. And number 5, we're going to be the best partner you've ever seen. And if we're not, you need to go back to value 2 and tell us. And then we'll go back to value 1 and try to fix those kinds of things. Okay. So it's all about communication. The college is about 2,550 undergraduates right now and growing. We do about 450 bachelor's degrees per year, over 13 majors. We are 24% women, and if back when in the old days when I went to school, that number was closer to 12 or 13%. Nationally, it's 18%, and so we put in special programs. So when I talk about diversity, we walk the walk. We do it. We just don't talk about it all the time. We're about 35% students of color, and that includes about 20% Hispanic. We're getting very close to what the population of Tucson actually looks like. We have a large graduate program as well. We do about $27 million a year in research expenditures, and that's part of our mission. Overall, we are about a $55 to $60 million a year business that I manage. We are about twice as big as U of A basketball. Let's put it in terms, okay? Yeah, the coach of U of A basketball, who is half as big as us, makes about 10 times more than I do. Okay, so that's just want you to understand where we're coming from. I have 8 departments, all are ABET accredited. I have 120 tenure track faculty. We do a lot of stuff, biomedical engineering. Actually, our project there is the image on that screen. That's what we do. Clean water is a big deal to us, and I hope it's a big deal to you too. We're not going to live in the Tucson Valley if we can't figure out how do we start to do reclaimed water. At some point, we will have to do that. I don't know whether you like it or not, but we will be doing that. Communication is absolutely critical. If you can't do energy, then it's hard to do water. And if you can do energy, then it's a little bit easier. By the way, if you got a lot of water, it's easy to produce energy. So water and energy are always very tightly coupled. So you have to talk about those together. And then finally, we have a big aerospace engineering and mechanical engineering group because defense is a big deal in Pima County. So we have a very large contractor, Raytheon Missile Systems there. And the University of Arizona is the #1 provider of employees to Raytheon. There are 1,800 U of A alumni at Raytheon worldwide, and there are 1,100 U of A engineers at Raytheon worldwide. So it's an incredible opportunity for us. This is actually my favorite slide in all the decks that I do, and I do hundreds of presentations per year. I always get the question, how many University of Arizona College of Engineering graduates work for companies in the state of Arizona? Now the question's not super well defined, because if you work for Raytheon in Massachusetts, is that okay? Does that really count? If you work for Boeing in Seattle, and we have a pretty big Boeing facility here in Mesa as well, is that okay? So I'm not going to count any of those. The red bars are the number of graduates that I had in a 5-year block, 2007 to 2011, 2002 to 2006. These are the graduates in that 5-year block. So those 1992 to 96 graduates are 20 years ago. In 2011, the black bars are the ones still working in Arizona for companies, and they are paying unemployment insurance taxes. Now, if you're a private entrepreneur and you're not in that system, you're not in this data set. So it's a lower bound on our impact. So I had about 1,900 graduates 20 years ago. In that 5-year block, about 625 of them are still working in Arizona. And as you would expect, as I get nearer to today, a higher percentage of my kids, and I call them kids even though I know they're not, are here. And so I'm at about 60% of my current graduates will go to work for Arizona companies. So that tells you how many. Now the bigger question is more interesting, is how much money do they make? Because that's really what the economic impact is. It's not just working, it's working for money. And if I add all this up, bachelor's degrees, and I put my graduates in there, it turns out the total wages for that group was, in 2011, in 1 year, was $350 million in Arizona companies. Now, you got to give us a little bit of multiplier there, right? You can't get a wage of $100,000 and only return $100,000 to the company. That's not going to work. That won't be sustainable. So even with a 2, 3x at the first jump, we're $1.5 billion per year in economic impact our graduates over the last 20 years. That's only the first level, right? Now they're going to spend money, and that's going to churn the economy more. So it's not hard to imagine us at multiple billions of dollars per year for economic impact. That's a better answer than how many of your kids go to work in Arizona companies. Okay. We're putting a new building together. Innovation is the key, not only here, and I love this incubator idea, by the way. But we're putting an innovation building. It'll be the first building at the University of Arizona in engineering that is not based on department. It's not based on mechanical. It's not based on electrical. It's based on research area. So those are the research areas in the current plan. Our architect was Smith Group, JJR up in Phoenix. The builder is Sunt. personal insistence, we're going to use Arizona firms. If we're doing this project on my campus and in my space, we're using Arizona firms. It's a lot of money. It's a $70 million project. We're in fundraising now for our $20 million piece. We're waiting a little bit on the state legislature for the bonding piece, and we would like your support in those kinds of things to go for the, they're sort of like speed bonds where the state will pay those back, and wouldn't you love to have some of those? And I'd love to spend some money up here and build on, okay. The key piece, it includes a wonderful student innovation center as well. You can't do innovation with just the faculty. It's really a student mix. I've got a lot of literature. We got a nice bunch of questions. Let me give it to the next player.
Thank you, Dr. Jeff Goldberg. At this time, I'd like to introduce John Kilrow. He brings more than 30 years of experience in real estate business, including land development, vertical development, and sales and marketing to the Shea Properties team. Mr. Kilrow has experience in commercial land sales, design and entitlement of the company's projects throughout the Metro Denver area, as well as the greater Southwest. He's been involved in the development of Highlands Ranch, an award-winning master plan community since its beginning in the early 1980s. Please help me welcome Mr. John Kilrow.
I was pleased to hear the other presentations and the mayor speak about building communities and what community means, because over my 30 years, that's all I've ever done is build communities. A lot of it in one location in Highlands Ranch, and we were talking earlier, I don't know how many times we said we'll be done in about 20 years. I spent 35 years there overall. We just reached 100,000 people in our community, and we're still growing a little bit. We're about done. We started with 22,000 acres, and we're down to about 150. But what we learned from that and the experience we're bringing to other communities is it takes a while, it takes a vision, and it takes a group like you have here to put the pieces in place. That's the part, the economic gardening that goes on first, and the rooftops, and the focus on the things that matter for the site selectors, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that, including how incentives work. We also develop a place called Denver Tech Center. Denver Tech Center right now is about 24 million square feet of office space in the south end of Denver. One of our guys has worked there about 27 years. The community is about 50 years old. And Meridian Business Park, which is about 900 acres, where we have about 4 million square feet of office space, that's been 20 years. None of this happens very quick. Another community in Denver called Reunion is 5,000 acres. It's taken us about 7 years to reach 500 people. It's on the outskirts of Denver. But what they all bring is the need for, and I think you said it, Chris, people going in the same direction and understanding what they need to put the infrastructure in place to attract business. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much, and hope I'm helpful.
Thank you so much, John. At this time, I would like to welcome back our moderator for the evening, Mr. Micah Miranda.
All right, so we're going to start off with a panel discussion. This first question is for all of you, so whoever wants to dive in first, go for it. But the question is, what does competitiveness look like when viewed through the lens of your profession?
One of the tools I think is really important for a city like Maricopa is
tax increment findings. That's a tool that, unfortunately, Arizona doesn't offer to other communities, but it's really an infrastructure planning model that other states have at their discretion to invest in projects and have tax recapture in the background. Then you have to look at the regional level, and regions really compete on labor, which we talked about, and compete on infrastructure, which compete on cost. It's coming down to energy diversification, for example, different types of projects. So, one thing that I'm involved in a major million square foot advanced industry manufacturing project, and one of their top criteria is not only electrical cost, but electrical diversification, because a lot of the EPA rules that we have are going to impact the cost on coal. And so that's one example. When we talk about competitiveness, it's really hard to determine because it means a lot of things for a lot of different people. When I think of very down to the community level, we talk about quality of life, we talk about the uniqueness and sense of place that we create, and that's really the back-end differentiation as the companies evaluating the region. What makes you different from West Valley? What makes you different, from Scottsdale, which has an international brand of tourism? You have to think about all of those attributes to make salient points relative to competitiveness. And so, one other thing I'll talk about with my peers here, I think, since I've seen infrastructure constantly talk about labor and the production of labor is becoming the most critical element to how companies think about entering the rest of the market. And so, we might have talked about 40% of the engineers, for example, are exiting the field over the next 5 to 7 years. So there's really a mass exodus in the talent innovation base of the market. And one other thing that we'll talk about is, Arizona, you have two legacy industry, Great Anchor in Tucson, aerospace and defense produces 43,000 direct high-wage jobs in this market. And then you look at advanced electronics, which is Intel, Microchip, Semiconductor. A lot of these companies are going through kind of mass, what I call some consolidation, some growing. But the reality is Arizona's litigation position is right in the middle. And our size warrants us to be much more competitive in the innovation position than we are. And so we've got some really top line, strong momentum on one side of the equation. On the other competitive side, we really have to focus on going around the world, joining innovation, creating an ecosystem for entrepreneurs to thrive. Because we are one of the top markets for producing companies and creating companies, but one of the worst at scaling companies. So I'll leave it at that. That's a lot of information.
I've heard the sound system is now working, so feel free to use the elements.
That work better? Okay. I'll just pick up on a couple of things that Chris talked about, and you talked a lot about the municipal and state arena. I'll put sort of the corporate hat on a little bit, and he used one specific example of energy diversity. Well, for that company, that's competitive. And I think one of the biggest things that the regional and community people need to do is listen to these and watch the proposals and understand. I call it answering the mail. If there's something in there that you can differentiate or you become competitive because of something that particular company, industry cluster needs and you have it, then you need to try and exploit that. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not, we sent out 45 boilerplate proposals last month, and we've got a pipeline full of $4 billion worth of potential projects. We met with these people, they understand we can solve their problem, and we think they're going to come here.
I think my competition's a little different. So I'm in an operation and a business where really I compete for people. I compete for faculty and staff, number one. If I don't have a strong faculty, then I don't really have anything. And then once I have that faculty and staff infrastructure in place, I then start to compete for students and to educate those, and then I compete for research as well. And we compete for research certainly at a national level and largely at an international level. For students, we compete locally with my good buddy Paul Johnson at ASU at Fulton, and we compete even more though with the California schools, with Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, with the Texas schools, even with New Mexico. If we can't show that we're a better value for those kids, and we can't show that to their parents and those kids, then we're not going to get those students. It's that simple. And then finally, I compete for partners. Most companies now, when they start talking about relationships with universities, It's not, let's work with 100 different universities and do a little bit with each one. They're really looking for much deeper relationships. So the first thing they come to me for is talent. If I can't provide that undergraduate BS degree, there's no relationship usually, unless I've got an incredibly special research skill. And then once I can show them I can provide talent, then they'll start to talk to me about research, and they'll talk to me about philanthropy, things like that. So the tradition in academics has been to go to companies with your hand up. We're trying to turn that around, and we're really trying to put, here's what we can do. Companies should treat me like a vendor. Like that, they should treat me like I'm a vendor. And that's the way that we want to be treated. That's the long-term relationship strategy.
You know, I would suggest a different spin on a couple things, but I think we're all in the same business. We're certainly all in the economic development business. We need rooftops to get retail, we need jobs to get rooftops, and they all just feed off of each other. In the companies that we've done large build-to-suits for, and they include Visa USA, Lucent Technology, First Data, they all were looking for the educated workforce. They were all looking for the ability to hire and keep people. Transportation, the things that were talked about before all were leading up to that. I do have a different take on the TIF funding. I think TIFs are fine, but not many developers are going to underwrite the money coming from TIFs because we don't believe in it for long enough. We don't know if we're going to hang in there long enough. The company I happen to work for never sells anything, much to our chagrin. But they're looking for the long-term hold. They can live with TIFs. Most developers can. And there was one other thought. I forgot it. So we'll move on.
All right, thank you very much. This question is specific to Mr. Cross. In general, what are the 3 most important factors that impact the site location decision-making process?
I think we touched on it a little bit, but it's a little bit like the real estate thing, cost, and then speed, which is cost. You know, typically the analysis includes labor costs, transportation costs, the cost of real estate, the cost of utilities, you know, the cost of taxes, the labor force cost. But one thing that often gets missed, and Chris talked about that, is the speed with which you can bring a project out of the ground, because in today's world, that's not only money, it's market share, it's first to market, and that speed becomes important, and that includes council, community willingness to work. How, you know, can we fast track this project? Are we better than the people next door? We have the same basic labor components, and so that comes down to some of the softer things. The spreadsheet will tell you the costs. The decisions will oftentimes be made on some of those softer things.
Follow-up question, and this could be geared toward Mr. Camacho. Sitting on the other side of the table from Mr. Cross during some of these site selection decisions, what's your perspective on that? Mr. Camacho.
On incentives, right? I was really nervous about hitting this button. You know, on the incentive side, I think, you know, my opinion is I'd love if we didn't have incentives, period. Markets would, you know, win and lose based upon the merit of the market. And the reality is, incentives are part of state government, part of local government, and you know, my opinion is differentiating between the two. So I think there's financial incentives at the state level that are absolutely necessary. There's tax incentives if targeted towards certain types of base industries that are going to create jobs and export. I think, you know, absolutely necessary. I think at the local level, when you talk about deal closing funds and really infrastructure planning, you know, in today's environment, particularly those that are peripheral markets, you know, companies want to go to communities where they know their risk is mitigated. And so if you have, and I've been in a number of discussions over my career where, you know, communities say, well, we can definitely get you that natural gas line, or we can get you that wastewater sizing you need, you know, just give us 18 months to get it there. Or 6 months even. And, you know, I sit across from Jay, and Jay says, you know, I can see him marking in his notebook, and what he's doing is saying, there's doubt here. And so part of this on the incentive side for me is more about, you know, structurally planning for the future, long-term, you know, investments in business parks and then the brand around those business parks that creates uniqueness in an environment or in a market. But then I also say, when it gets down to a granular level, when it's Maricopa competing with a submarket in Denver, for example, sometimes it comes down to dollar and cents, and putting in that infrastructure, not putting in infrastructure makes the deal. And so that's why you like to have a fund like this to create the flexibility. And again, you can put the tight parameters around that says you're only going to incent for certain types of projects and wages and so forth. But more and more communities are actively pursuing this type of model, adopting it by resolution, and then giving the council and really staff the flexibility to work within that adopted resolution to attract and retain industry.
Mr. Kilrow.
Once again, I think my spin's a little different. And when people tell you it's not about the money, you can be assured of one thing: you're not telling me the truth. It's always about the money, but it depends on how that's being presented. We have a project now we're working on. It's 300,000 foot building. Going to run about $300 a square foot. On a 7.5% return, they're looking at a $23 rent. If the city gave us $1 million, it would change the rent about 50 cents, not a whole bunch. But what was important to them is we had redundant power, we had an infrastructure in place, and we had a fast process. They didn't want to be out there talking at a lot of public hearings about what they're doing. They wanted to be doing it. So I think the speed to market thing has a lot more benefit. There's not enough cash you can give us to get a deal done, but what you can do is make it really easy on us. Infrastructure, understanding how to make the process work, and just showing those folks that you care about it. That has a lot of value, and a lot more value than I think a lot of cities put into it.
Great, thank you very much. Next question. I really want to follow up on what Dr. Goldberg was talking about in regards to attracting their talent. I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more depth about how do leading research universities, University of Arizona, that'll be my one plug for my alma mater tonight. That's why I got invited. How do leading research universities compete to attract that talent? It's competitive.
It's extremely competitive. So let me break it up into two spots. I'll take the student side first and the faculty side. And there are some overlaps. On the student side, you've got to be able to show the student that they're going to fit in very well. I got to have people here with either children or grandchildren that are getting ready to make a decision relative to a university. So I start recruiting students when they're in 6th grade. So, and the only group on campus that can maybe out recruit me is football. That's the only group, and they don't scale as well as I do. So we run summer camp programs for 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. Once I can get them onto my campus and I show them the campus, I like my chances at that point in time. But at some point I got to show them my programs. So we have a whole set of programs that range from residence life to tutoring, and we really sell, if you come to the University of Arizona, we're going to take care of you. We really play up to our 5 values, and that's the strategy. We always come back to the 5 values all the time. And so we have dorm programs, we have ambassador programs, we have 35 student clubs, we make automobiles, we make airplanes. It's an incredible array of experiences. We have a senior design experiences that's one of the best in the country, interdisciplinary, 300 kids go through, we're running 50 projects in parallel. You want to see something exciting, come down to the U of A campus, May 6th. It's the last Tuesday of the spring semester. You'll see all of our projects in one place in the Student Union. It's the best day. There'll be TV, there'll be little kids running around. You get a really good idea, see what engineers do. So for students, it's programming. And then finally, the last piece that parents always ask me is, will my kid get a job? By the way, I've never had a student ever ask me that question. But it's the parents' question. And at that point, I put up our data. And certain majors are certainly better than others, and it all depends on what you want to do. And if you want to go into mining, I can put you as a sophomore in almost any company in the world. If you want to go into civil engineering, I'm a little bit narrower at that right now. I can place every electrical engineer 2 or 3 times right now because of the way and because we're always in a lag. We always miss that. On the faculty side, it's a lot different. You've got to be able to have collegiality, And you've got to have other faculty that they can work with. And then it comes down to when faculty tell me the money doesn't really matter, I know they're lying. Okay, so it's no different in that sense. It comes with startup packages and putting real cash on the table to build a research program. And it comes with facilities. If you don't have world-class facilities, I can't recruit a person from Harvard without something to really bring them here. And we did that 2 years ago. We recruited Shane Snyder in water from Harvard. It took more than $1 million in cash, and it took a work with Pima County to build a laboratory that we're going to go on board with next year. So if you really want to play with the big boys, get ready to play.
Thank you. This is a question for Mr. Camacho. Can you please describe the real estate requirements of companies currently evaluating the greater Phoenix market? What are they looking for? I think we've briefly touched on it. If you can go into a little bit more depth on what they're looking for.
So currently, GPEC has 312 companies evaluating the market, and currently 85% of those companies are looking for existing space. So a lot of the time we talk with our communities about being ready and what kind of spec development do we have in our portfolio, what's coming online, look at vacancies, look at absorption, and when I look across the continuum of our projects, the majority of our large office floor plates, which I think is an interesting dynamic for our market, and I'm sure John can appreciate this, being from Denver. Our overall vacancies for office as a whole are over 21%, but our vacancy for over 50,000 square foot floor plates in the region are 7%. So there's a huge distinction between what's on the market today versus what our clients can actually use. At the same time, a similar perspective is occurring on the industrial market as well, where we have 11% to 13% vacancies, depending on how you slice it. And for the larger square footage, we're seeing vacancies between 7 and 8%. And so, what we're seeing this flip back to, and you'll see a lot of our projects that are going to be announced in Q1 and Q2 of this coming year, this fiscal year, are built-to-suit projects as opposed to existing space takedowns. And you'd wonder, how is that actually occurring when 85% of your projects are looking for existing space? But in Phoenix, we had this, still coming online in 2011. We had a lot of product coming online, even in 2012. That exceeded absorption. And so now we're seeing this move towards build-to-suits again, and even some speculative development on the industrial side, which I think, again, as we have big product being a big logistics distribution market, we're going to see a lot of this big product soaked up in 2014, which will astonish a lot of the capital markets and REITs on the industrial side. And I think office is going to be a bit of a slower recovery, but again, a lot of the projects, those 312 that are looking at the market, our conversion rates generally about 17, 18%. So we're going to see anywhere from 35 to 40 projects enter the market this year. And a lot of those floor plate requirements are over 50,000 square feet.
Wow. Okay. Well, to follow on to that, I would be interested to get Mr. Kilrow's perspective on what really drives the decision then to bring these buildings out of the ground and move forward with development.
Well, it's interesting because Chris hit on something that's very, very important, is the size of the space that folks are looking for, and actually the change in the size of spaces. Open workstations have given us a whole different tenor on things. Developers are looking at it differently. We built a building in Glendale, and we sold it 3 years ago, and at the time, when we were trying to lease that building, we were competing with 5 other buildings of identical size that wanted 100,000 feet. The problem was we had allowed a 3,000 square foot user on our first floor, and that particular tenant did not want anyone else in the building. So we had to relocate that person, and that cost us a bunch of money. But the other piece of this is that many of the buildings are older buildings, and the power requirements, the ducting, the LEED certification, the elevator times are all changing to where they want more immediate gratification. Many of the old buildings can't do that. So you're seeing a different spec market. When someone moves out, that becomes our spec market. And many times it's an old building. Developers like us, really, right now, spec is not even in the formula. We've designed 4 different quality building types, and if you come in as a builder suit, we can show you all 4, but we won't start any of them until we have it about 60% leased.
Thank you. I have a question here for Mr. Cross. We often hear about site selectors and their role. What feedback or what are key factors for a young, growing city like Maricopa to consider so we can become more in tune with the corporate site selection community?
Great question, because again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit. You guys have done a great job of setting that vision and looking at those things, but drawing on some of the other comments. It really is about speed. You have a small community, you have support. Those are definitely things that can help. It is about cost. You have a good, low cost basis. I think it's keeping your eye on the ball. I just met with a regional group that came out of the Arkansas area that spent 2 years, chasing a large manufacturing facility. It was Toyota, and they were third. So now they've got 2 years and they didn't do any blocking and tackling because all their resources went into that. Now they're behind the curve and they're trying to play catch up. If there's anything I could say is, I'm not saying don't play in those, but don't lose sight of the fundamental strategy that you've got of putting in that infrastructure, of getting that site selection, certified site or shovel-ready site. Be ready to support those industries and those industry clusters that fit with the product that you have, and then keep hitting the singles.
Great, thank you. So when organizations such as GPEC or City of Maricopa Economic Development call your phone, want to schedule a meeting, what goes through your mind?
Well, typically when we get that phone call, it's a request for proposal, and that goes back to that cost thing. But a lot of times it's really area expertise. They're looking for something that has an area of expertise, and if we have a good fit, we try to really pursue those things. If we don't have a good fit, we try to either convey or bring on somebody that has that fit with the particular industry that they're looking at. But the first thing that really goes through your mind is, are they looking, you have this little library in your head, that things flip around when you're talking about that. Are they looking in the right place? Do we need to tell them bad news, that this really isn't going to fit? But most of the time, it starts with listening to them, trying to understand what their needs are, and how we can best take the inventory and our understanding of the particular regions and fit those together. And a lot of times that comes to working with the communities and finding out and knowing and understanding and having databases that we can apply and bring them, bring the two together. That's really our job, is to bring those two together and be the legs and the eyes and the analysis that they may not have either the expertise or the manpower to do.
Okay, thank you. This question was actually submitted to us by a resident, and it goes out to Dr. Goldberg. Universities have a large library of intellectual property. How can they effectively commercialize this intellectual property to drive economic development?
That's a great question. If you had asked me that question 3 years ago, I'd have said we were an abject failure in that process. Terrible would have been the only rating, because I'm honest and honest communication. What we've done, though, in the last 3 years is we've brought a new organization together, Tech Launch Arizona, and that really helps with all phases of this, from the discovery part to the disclosure part to protecting the IP to licensing to startup companies. They've got a tech park as well. It's really about the relationships that we can build with companies. It's another thing that we want to be able to do. But Dave Allen has started Tech Launch Arizona. We've put some investment in it using the TRIF dollars, which is the TRIF dollars are the sales tax dollars. We get 0.5 cent of the sales tax, that's technology reinvestment funds, back to universities. And we spend probably $2.5 million a year now on this technology transfer. What we've been able to show faculty is we can help them, and they're willing to do it. and we've got a few players. I've done more tech transfer work in the last 6 months in my college than I had done in the past 6 years. And so the portfolio is getting larger. Our goal is 1 disclosure per day. That's what we'd like to see. We've hired people that are embedded in the colleges and have this background. And so I have a person, I pay half of their salary, Dave Allen pays half of their salary, and they go around and snoop. And they see what are we doing and what might be interesting, because our faculty really don't have the ability to know what the market is. They know the technology, they don't really know what else. And they also don't know how it might relate to something they didn't think about. And so if you have people that can do that. So it's a large infrastructure. I'm a member of the Tucson Desert Angels. They do about $3.5 million a year in angel investing, probably 20 deals, and it really helps to have people like that in the community who I can call up at a moment's notice. They come in, talk to our faculty, and they can talk them out of being the CEO of the company, because that's almost a guarantee that the company will fail. And so it really requires a whole infrastructure. It's not just us, it's us and our partners to be able to do that as well. And I have local entrepreneurs that work with me regularly.
Great. You mentioned angel investors. For our audience members who may not be familiar with what angel investors are, can you go into a little bit of explanation on that?
Angel investors, certainly the group in Tucson, the Desert Angels, it's a community group of people that have at least $1 million in net worth, or a salary of, I think, $300,000 or $200,000 is the rule. And companies will come and make a pitch and ask for money. And these companies, I mean, they come from Phoenix, they come from Tucson, they come from, we've had some from San Diego. And then each individual decides how much they would like to play. And so if we're doing 20 deals and it's $3.5 million, then you can see where the deal size is. And they range from about $500,000 a deal down to about $100,000. But you have to have a proven technology and a real business plan. And the Desert Angels will help you construct those kinds of things. So you go before the screening committee first, and they'll help you with the presentation, and then you can get up, and I see, let me see, I probably see about 30 pitches, 35 pitches a year. So there's a pretty high hit rate. And we're the 10th or 11th largest in the country in Tucson. Phoenix has a group I'm sure of, because I've seen the lead in that group. And certainly, Boston, San Francisco, San Diego, these are all very large places. But I can tell you, students and faculty want to get in this game. And it's to the point with our faculty, we have changed promotion and tenure criteria to include these things as credit now toward promotion and tenure. That's new as of 2 years ago. So we want people in that game.
Thank you for explaining that. This is a question for the whole panel, and it really provides some background to what the mayor talked about with P3. So the question is what role do you see public-private partnership, P3s, playing in future business attraction projects? I'll open it up to the panel.
I didn't even see it. Oh, here. Since my mic is on, I'll take a swing first. So if you get a chance to look at the Never Settle strategic plan, the new plan that we put before the Board of Regents early or late last year, public-private partnerships are a key piece of that. And most of the time we're the public, and the private is the companies of the world. And so we're trying to figure out how do we get more in-depth relationships. And for me in engineering, it's how do I get a relationship where companies will hire students? How do I get a relationship where companies will go with me to get other people's money? If I want to attack the research money of the individual company, typically there is not enough money there to make either them happy or me happy. So going after their money is a dead end. I won't be able to live in the lifestyle that I would like with those dollars. So I have to go after the federal government money, or I have to go after something else. We also team now with Pima County. We're trying to put together a water cluster. I'm sure some people have heard of it. We had a large event last November at the Biosphere. The next event is in April. John Rothschild, mayor of Tucson, is going to hold that event. And that is a 5-state, 5-university, 30-city, 100-company kind of event to try to do research and develop economic development within the water industry, because it's so important to the Southwest. We should play on places that are important to us.
Taking notes here.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that's the way we're going to do business. Large partnerships with a few very strategic partners, rather than me trying to hit, go out and do 200 meetings and try to make everybody happy.
Anybody else from the panel want to address role P3s?
Maybe just a quick comment that I think that when you look at it from both the education, the municipal, the corporate side, it's inherent that we work together because everybody has their level of expertise. I may be the company that needs research done, but I don't have the expertise to do it, so I can do the research. I may be the company that needs a certain type of infrastructure, but working with the public sector can make those things happen. I think it's really critical in today's world to do both the speed, the efficiency, and the effectiveness, that we need to learn how to work together better and more effectively as we move forward.
I would say that we can't work alone at all. It just doesn't work. The notion of water is the biggest one I think we're going to be facing in the next 20 years. I happen to be chairman of a water district. We serve 140,000 residents, and in Colorado it's a big deal, and we always get angry when we come anywhere south and see green golf courses when it's brown in Colorado. But that being said, it's gonna hurt us all, and that certainly is going to be a public-private solution to any of the problems. We're seeing things in Denver that are very creative, things like recharging aquifers, storing water in underground reservoirs and whatnot. All of this starts with private partners, private-public partnerships, and we just can't live without it.
Thank you. All right. We're coming to the end of the Q&A here, but I wanted to end with one question for all here. What changes will your organization need to make over the next 20 years to remain competitive?
I guess I'll start and we can go down the line again. Yeah, that's a great question. I think the world's going to change dramatically in the next 20 years, and at the highest levels, I think economic development, maybe at the regional level to start. I've seen a profound change in the way that EDOs, economic development organizations, operate from a standpoint of, it used to just be we would go out, we as economic developers, and promote the attributes and the assets of the region or cities to prospective buyers or companies, as an example. But the reality is we had to get much more sophisticated on our economy to really understand the dynamics of change. And as we look at those industries that are going to contract and those industries that are going to grow, and how do you foster innovation, all of that's now in our purview. And we have to guide elected officials down the path of knowing where to invest and where to stay away from, where to take calculated risks and where not to. And I think that's very different from the space we played in the early 2000s and in the 90s, being very promotional. And I'm just saying that about the economic development discipline. But even anything more broader than that, I think it's what's the focus on science, technology, and innovation as it relates to regions and states? Because in reality, you're going to see over the next decade a lot of winners and losers when it comes to markets. Those that are gaining market share and innovation position, STEM graduates, so science, technology, engineering, and math positioning, all of this collectively is going to define whether your market is successful or in decline. And so I see that at GPEC, a very pivotal role that we're going to play, and it's going to require our cities to maintain this balance of visioning and regionalism and strategy collectively. Because if one mayor, for example, in Metro Phoenix, or two mayors decided, we don't want to go down this path anymore, and we want to be parochial and do this on our own, that'll really disrupt the regional model. And you've seen that in many markets, in particular where I come from, in the Midwest. They're seeing that fragmentation occur, and they're now rebuilding their economies. And I think Arizona's got just this clean, just like we heard Maricopa earlier, this kind of clean canvas. Arizona's still young enough that we can really, attract and really grow more Raytheons, more Intels. And so I think, what I see is this change of not just attracting companies, but cultivating the innovators and really connecting high worth construction outcome individuals to those innovators is going to be really important for Arizona, because there's a lot of capital in the western U.S. A lot of capital is tied to construction and real estate. How do you move that and continue to move it towards innovation and early stage entrepreneurs?
Well, globally, I think from site selection process, Chris touched on it a little bit, the technology and the availability of information and the speed and velocity of which that is happening, changing every day, and companies and municipalities are going to expect us to keep up with that, and that's going to mean being much more effective at gathering data, putting it together in a format that's concise and usable by our clients and meets their needs in a much faster and efficient manner than we can do it now. And for most part, there's a lot of people still involved in putting that together, and some of those cost models have to become more centralized, if you will, and the speed that we provide that information back has to improve, and the quality of the decision making, the quality of the information for the decision makers, I think is going to be, much, much higher and much more defined than it is today.
Speed, a common theme we keep hearing coming back. Speed to market, speed to customers. So, interesting.
Let me break it up into three pieces here. Again, the research, the teaching, and the business model. So the business model in higher ed is clearly changing, right? In 2009, 2010, we blew off $200 million in state appropriation. So our state appropriation went from $450 million to $250 million, literally almost overnight. What we have done, I'm sure some of you have seen this, we have increased our tuition. That tuition increase has brought back about $100 million, and we believe we're at the top where we can do on tuition, right? You just can't keep doing this, else you start to be non-competitive. So the business model is we've got to go out and get external sources. So I came today from San Francisco to be here, and I was visiting alumni in San Francisco, and my predecessors didn't do those kind of things anywhere near to the level that I do that kind of stuff. So the way the business is running and where you get the money is going to be completely different 20 years from now. We're really in the business of taking 18-year-old children and turning them into 22-year-old adults. We do that through an education process and a residential university process. We're still going to have to do that 18 to 22-year-old shtick, but we may not do it all residential. Right? The ways people learn and the way that people go to school will certainly change in the next 20 years. Most of my faculty get up in front of a big group, they talk for an hour, they go off and do some homework, we come back every few weeks, we give you an exam. That paradigm likely will change, and everybody won't be getting up there to talk. We'll only have the best people talk, and we'll be buying material, and we'll be buying content, and we'll run more as a coach, less as a sage. And that's likely to happen. It's called inverting the classroom, and it's starting to take hold in very large ways. It's a much better way to learn. It's more enjoyable, and it'll fit well with 18 to 22-year-olds. The last piece is in research. When I started in this business, and even now, the faculty member was by and large a small business. They're independent entrepreneurs doing their thing. They have their students, they have some postdocs, they run their own business. That does not get the exciting research projects anymore. If you can't play nicely with others and put ideas together into large enterprises, you will not get your fair share of the research dollars in this country. So the large funding now in NIH and NSF and NASA, the kind of projects we have, are all large team projects. It's who are your partners, how well do you work together, how well can you manage those projects. When I tell you that's an upheaval in our faculty, you should, over the next 20 years, in 20 years it takes to change out a whole generation of faculty. That's what we're talking about here. So.
Thank you. Mr. Kilrow.
We were actually talking about this earlier, and it's the easiest way to figure out how we got to change is just sit in a room with a bunch of 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and watch them text each other, and one's at the other end of the couch, and watch how they shop. My daughters buy toilet paper online because they say, why should I go to a grocery store when I can have it delivered? It's impacted how we build our offices. We always have a workout room. We always have bike lockers. Those $2,700 bikes are not going to be chained out front. They're in a bike locker. When we develop our apartments now, we have huge rooms for packages. We are actually installing refrigerators in one of our downtown projects because they have their groceries delivered. And we have wine cellars in some of our apartment projects. The retail is just changed. Drive by a shopping center someday. The curse of the large box is eliminating all the little ones. I used to build 30,000 feet with a King Soopers or Safeway or whatever, and now it's, if you build 10, you might be able to get at least. And if you build a Starbucks, it better have a drive-through, because that's the only way it's going to work. And banks, drive-through, banks are getting out of the market. So we're seeing in every single sector, what we're seeing is change and constant change. Our biggest fear in our office is we got a lot of old bald guys making decisions. And we need young people making decisions because they're the ones taking it. Development has changed. It's become more collaborative. When I started in the business, my goal was to keep the people that didn't like me away from the people that haven't decided they didn't like me yet. Because we're developers and we're raping and pillaging. Now we're providing a service and we've got to include everybody else. So the whole attitude has changed and we've got to move with it. It's that simple.
Thank you very much. At this time, we're going to open it up for Q&A from the audience, but next time we're in the Denver market, Chris, I think we need to swing down to one of Shea's apartment complexes and check out how those wine cellars are working in apartments. Interesting model. So Denise and I are going to be running around the microphones. If you have questions, raise your hand and we'll get to you. Mr. Filas.
Thank you all so much for being here. Quick bear down to Dr. Goldberg, civil engineer, class of 95.
Way to go.
Sir. We've heard a lot of generalities about how to maintain that competitive edge, and fortunately here in Maricopa we have some great leaders who are out there working it and advocating for this city. What I'd like to know is if any of you have any specific advice on how Maricopa can go forward, this particular city can make changes, or some items that we can personally advocate for that are going to make us better suited to fall into that competitive edge. Anything specific for this community?
Great question. Thank you.
I would start with jobs, and Chris touched on it. The large companies in Phoenix, the large aerospace and defense complex in Tucson, those all have second and third tier manufacturing, high paying, jobs that in my mind would fit the market, the model, the space that's available here. That would be something I would think about as industry cluster or industry targets that I would market to potentially.
Go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead.
So a couple thoughts. I'd say first, and I agree with that, but I would say on the innovation side with your incubator, I'd be thinking about how do you appraise your current residents and knowing where there's a lot of institutional or intellectual capital that's consumed here. You mentioned your bachelor degree at 46%, and Denver's one of the highly coveted markets with high BA producing, but that's much higher than the norm here in the market. So I'd be assessing what's your talent leakage look like, where are they going, where are they working, so you have a very sophisticated labor concentration analysis when you have companies evaluating your market. You're going to have a differentiator looking across the region. And the second I would say is connecting those innovators, smart people, to those 18 to 22-year-olds that are coming out of the universities and want to live here and want to stay here, making sure that they have that ecosystem around them as they have questions about how to start a business, how to grow a business, how to manage capital, how to look at supply chains. If you can build that system around them, you're going to grow those companies here. And one interesting stat that often gets overlooked is that most Fortune 500 companies are grown from a local market. They're not recruited in. And so when you hear about Company X, Northrop Grumman moving from LA to DC or any of these other big headline bellwethers, the reality is most high-wage, high-tech companies are grown in a local environment. So I'd say embrace the innovation that's already occurring here. And then the last piece I would say is committing long-term to your business and industrial parks and finding ways to continue to chip away at that infrastructure required. And then on top of that, continuing to invest in marketing to promote those business parks. Because again, what I see in many communities across the country is you get one council that seems very pro new development, very pro planning, and you invest, and then the next council comes in and shifts that and doesn't want to continue to do so. This is a 10-year commitment at a minimum. And that's what it takes for these kind of communities to really grow and function the right way. So those would be my couple observations for you.
Anybody else? Question from the audience?
I think we have a question on this side.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Rachel LaFall. Go Wildcats. I have a question. I know we're all here. So with the limited amount of infrastructure that we have in the city of Maricopa as far as bringing new businesses here, yes, jobs are a great factor to utilize our educated workforce that we have here. My question is, it's a strain for our city to fund such building of this infrastructure. Do you guys have any types of suggestions where we might be able to partner or collaborate with the company so that the cost of instituting this infrastructure is not solely on the taxpayers?
Thank you.
I would say it's pretty hard. The communities that we've worked on, in almost all communities over 40 acres, we've created metropolitan districts with taxing authority of up to 50 mills on every single one of them. So the folks that are in those buildings are paying a little bit more. And that's how we've funded a lot of infrastructure. It's worked for us. You can get carried away and allow too much tax because everyone's looking at that still on a square footage basis. In Denver, you can range from paying taxes of $3 a square foot on a retail building to $7. And if they can go across the street to get $3, they're going to do it. So I think that's the balancing act that you're always playing. I think there are mechanisms out there to do that. We also instituted in another community a systems development fee, which is $30,000 an acre, which the developer pays. Of course, that gets passed in the rent, but that puts infrastructure in. They're just ways of disguising spending money is all they really are.
No grant strategies for these kinds of things? There's no external agencies that want to do United States business development? And I mean, we built the streetcar in Tucson with $57 million or $60 million worth of Tiger funds of stimulus money. Now we're not doing, I know, I don't want to get into an argument with everyone here. We're not going to do that again, but there are federal programs to do these kind of things, aren't there? Mm-hmm. Trio must know about some of these. I guarantee. These guys are putting $600 million together, I heard, so yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to put $2 billion together. But
yeah, there you go.
Anyway, so you're spot on. Both of you have great comments on improvement districts and others to assist in the sharing of cost. There are federal programs. The reality of the federal programs with the recent trims, they make you go through extensive planning models prior to even getting into real infrastructure. So there are programs available. We found they're not overly generous, but what I found state to state is you'll find most states have, and we have one for road infrastructure, what's called the Economic Strengths Project program, is set for kind of non-urban communities to invest in infrastructure through this particular program, but it's road infrastructure. And so one thing that GPEC's been advocating for, and I say that softly because it's been a very complex fiscal house as of late and will continue to be. But the reality is communities like this, and there's several around the Metro Phoenix market, even around the state, is that it's really hard for cities on their own to invest in infrastructure and plan for the future, because it's tough to get that return, initially, and if you even have the cash to put into it. So it's a great question, a great point. Well, all I would say to this is you've got to think about a long-term plan, invest in that infrastructure that matters, and do thoughtful infrastructure due diligence, because it's not just bringing extensive infrastructure to a site. It's really understanding what kind of compatible uses could exist for your site. So it might be an office that might have lower water requirement and capacity requirements than, say, an industrial park. But you can define all of that, and that's what I would advise the economic development team to do, is really assess what would be that right balance of infrastructure and what's that cost plan, and then work with GPEC and work with the state and the feds on trying to assemble resources to help offset that cost.
Any more questions from the audience? Wow, you answered all your questions. Mayor Price looks like he has a question.
Thank you. Thanks. I know we've harped on this a little bit. I think we've danced around it just a tad, but was wondering if you could just maybe even throw out an example. I heard one the other day at a GPEC ambassador meeting on a panel similar to this, where we were talking about speed to market and how truly important that is. And again, I know we've talked about it tonight, but I mean, they made an example about a company that produces widgets at $2 million a month, and if they have to come in and say, I don't have 18 months to wait on that, because you do the math on that and it's exponential. But if I can get it in 3 months, I'm only out $6 million instead. And so I was just wondering if you could touch on that again, because again, that is part of the infrastructure. That's part of the vision that you talked about, Chris, is setting the long-term goals to set the foundation so that you can have and overcome that speed to market issue.
There are a couple of specifics, and you're exactly right. There are two issues that come to speed to market. Sometimes it's relocation, sometimes it's expansion. We're working with an end user in Texas right now that's a metal bender, and it's costing them 6 digits a month because of transportation issues they're having in their current location. So every month that goes by is costing them a significant amount of money. So that that speed to market for relocating that and getting, they won't even consider building. They are looking for existing space that has certain floor load requirements, certain crane capacities, certain transportation qualities. So that's a specific where that comes into play. What you can do, I think, is to have those shovel-ready certified sites, work with your public-private partnerships to make certain that you have fast-track kinds of development, plan approvals, inspection processes for those people that meet your job or your office space or your criteria. You can't do that for everybody, because then it's not fast track anymore. But for those people that meet that, then you're showing that end user or that person who has a speed issue that you understand it and that you're willing to help them accomplish that. I don't know if that's specific enough, but.
I've got a comment on that too, and I got one real life example. We're working with an insurance company that's looking for a 200,000 square foot building. They want it delivered next August, and they were working with another city for over a year, and they decided to bail out because they weren't getting what they needed. I think in addition to speed, we want predictability. We want to know that it's going to take 4 months. If it's bad news and it's going to take 6 months, just tell us, so we don't have to bang our heads against the wall and spend a bunch of money. And we want the truth. There's another developer in a town we worked in that was told he could get approvals on a certain project. He spent $1 million in design, and then he was turned down by city council. I know I can't say much bad about government, but sometimes it's goofy, and it needs to be predictable.
John, huddle with Chris and I afterwards. Let's talk about that 200 square foot user. So we might have a spot for him here in the region.
Yeah, we tried.
Now, Mike, I'll give you one example too. That's kind of it's top of mind because it happened this week. We had a major California company in the market looking at a major data center mission critical operation, and they met with 3 different communities, and obviously these kind of centers require a lot of power, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of fiber. So all things being equal, we got down to these 3 sites that they really liked, and then went in and met with these 3 communities. And the outcome of that, and it was John's earlier point made me think about this, they didn't care about incentives, didn't care about labor, didn't care about really anything else but the confidence in that community. And they left with 1 shining star in this market, and the other 2 didn't do so hot. And really what set them apart was, and again, to John's point, which I find funny, is, the way that cities interface with business, you have to be thinking like a business person. It's always got to be, you're going to try to solve problems, you want to be a realist, but the commitment across the board from the city manager in this case that permeated across the other department heads versus the other meetings that they had where they got the standard kind of, we're going to treat you like a customer, but it was the standard boilerplate response they give to everyone. That's the differentiator, and that's probably why they land on this particular site over the other 2. So that's a customer service element that has to start with the council, certainly be with the mayor, but be with the city management all the way across your department heads, and having that really pro-business mindset, but also being realist, to your point, because you can't promise things you can't deliver, because that's even worse. So I'm glad you brought that up. Good point.
Any more questions? All right, well then we will close the Q&A. I think we're actually right on time, so we're doing pretty good.
I think this evening really inspired some great dialogue amongst the panelists, and we simply cannot thank you enough for being here tonight. In front of you, you'll find a small token of our appreciation for participating in our 2014 Economic Summit. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Camacho, Mr. Cross, Dr. Goldberg, and Mr. Kilrow. We hope you found this evening's program interesting, educational, and entertaining. Again, on behalf of the city, I would like to thank you all for attending the 2014 Economic Summit, The Competitive Edge. If you're interested in learning more about the Maricopa Advocate Program, please check out our website for additional information. Feel free to network. Have a wonderful evening and drive safe.